call now on the Honourable Premier to grace us with prayers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues. Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech Thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Parliament now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of Thy name and for the safety, honour and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign, King Charles III, William, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established among us. Especially, we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Speaker of the Parliament, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of the Cabinet, ex-officio members, members of the Parliament, the Chief Justice and members of the Judiciary, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the functions or the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for in Thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be Thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For Thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make His face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of His countenance upon us and give us peace, now and always. Amen.
Please be seated. This Honourable House has now resumed its business and is now in session.
Administration of oaths or affirmations?
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker, messages and announcements?
None. I have one apology. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Transport is unable to be here today.
Presentation of petitions?
None.
Presentation of papers and of reports? Report of the Standing Business Committee, third meeting of the 2021-22 session of the Cayman Islands Parliament, to be laid on the table by the Chairman of the Standing Business Committee.
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to seek your permission to lay on the table of this Honourable House the report of the Standing Business Committee for the third meeting of the 2021-22 session of this Cayman Islands Parliament.
So ordered. Is the Premier speaking to the report?
Mr. Speaker, no thank you.
Questions to Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet?
Madam Clerk, you have an order paper, and I'd appreciate you asking each question, and I'll do what I have to do as this presiding officer.
Yes, sir. Elected member for Georgetown North to ask the Honourable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. Question number 1.
The member for Georgetown North is absent from this Honourable House, therefore his question falls away. It's removed from the order paper.
The elected member for Red Bay to ask the Honourable Minister of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. Question number 2.
The elected member for Raid B is absent from this honorable House. Therefore, his question falls away and is removed.
The elected member for Georgetown South to ask the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness, question number 3.
The elected member for Georgetown South is absent from this honorable House, and therefore the question number 3, standing in her name, is removed from the order paper.
The elected member for Georgetown North to ask the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness, question number 4.
The elected member for Georgetown North is absent from this House, therefore his question cannot be asked and falls away. Removed from the order paper.
Statements by Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet.
I have 3 statements from Honourable Ministers, one including from the Honourable the Premier, and I'll ask him if he is ready for that. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to bring, by way of an update to honourable members of this House and the public, an update on the ISWIMS project, or the Integrated Solid Waste Management System, which is what the acronym means, otherwise known also as the REGEN project. Mr. Speaker, in addition to steady progress towards financial close of this important national project, progress continues on capping and remediating the main mound of the Georgetown landfill. If any members of Parliament have driven past the landfill recently, they will have noticed the enhanced vegetative screening along the Esteli-Tibbetts Highway and the layer of topsoil currently being added to the cap. Mr. Speaker, capping began under the previous administration in March 2020, when an initial layer of fill was placed over the waste mound. In November 2021, this administration commenced construction of the engineered cap, including the geosynthetic liner and gas management system. Capping the waste mound has always been an important component of the Integrated Solid Waste Management System project. Once completed, this proper engineered cap will prevent pests, reduce the risk of landfill fires, eliminate odors, and reduce methane emissions, a potent greenhouse gas that is a global driver of climate change. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to be able to confirm to my colleagues and the country that Phase 1 of the landfill remediation is nearly complete. The final layer of soil will support the growth of grasses and shrubs that will provide an attractive green surface that is also resistant to erosion. Along with the visible continued progress of the landfill capping project, work continues between the Cayman Islands government and the DART-led consortium to finalize project agreement negotiations and reach financial close on the public-private partnership for the delivery of our new integrated solid waste management system. Mr. Speaker, I think we can all agree that no single administration is responsible for Mount Trashmore. It has taken our country over 50 years to reach this stage, and I will say that I do believe credit is due to the previous administration for their efforts to reach commercial close on the project negotiations with DART, with the signing of a project agreement on March 26, 2021. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I also believe that the opposition has not painted an accurate picture when it comes to the level of work that remained to be done after their administration signed that agreement, amid much fanfare and self-congratulation, less than 3 weeks before the general election in 2021. While there have been suggestions from members of the opposition that our PAC government inherited a project where the negotiations were essentially complete and we just needed to get on with the construction of the project, I want to make it absolutely clear, sir, that that was simply not the case. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it would be fair to say that nothing could be further from the truth. You see, contrary to what the current members of the opposition have suggested, we were not handed a fully negotiated contract to simply forward and execute. While I cannot go into details due to commercial sensitivities and the fact that negotiations are still very active, another fact that I firmly believe the opposition is very much aware of, yet has neglected to mention in their many recent utterances. Suffice it to say that while there were a number of areas that have been agreed, there were still a number of significant conditions precedent to be negotiated when the previous administration signed the project agreement at the end of March 2021. Mr. Speaker, I believe members have previously heard me describe that project agreement as an agreement to make an agreement, as there was still a great deal of work to be completed in order to finalize contract negotiations and reach financial close. The March 26, 2021 project agreement, which the opposition approved just before the general elections and celebrated as a crowning achievement of their administration, envisioned a financial close target date of September 30th, 2021. Mr. Speaker, as the PAC government worked to familiarize themselves with this important project upon coming into office, I was certainly surprised to discover just how many conditions precedent there were in the signed project agreement and the sheer number of issues, many of which were very significant and very complex, that had been left to be negotiated and agreed to achieve financial close. In fact, Mr. Speaker, in August 2021, our legal advisors shared a report that gave an overview of the outstanding items to financial close, the vast majority of which were shown as not yet agreed, and there were significant issues to be addressed. That report, Mr. Speaker, ran for nearly 40 pages, and it had page after page after page of outstanding items that still needed to be negotiated and agreed. It is my opinion, Mr. Speaker, that there is quite simply, no way that the project agreement that was signed could reach financial close in the time frame that had been projected or promoted last year. Not unless one or both parties agreed to make concessions on some key points immediately without taking into account the best interests of their side. Concessions that would run the life of the contract, and quite possibly concessions that the people of the Cayman Islands would quite literally be paying for over a 25-year period of the system being in operation. So yes, Mr. Speaker, a project agreement was signed and progress had definitely been made. But to paint that project agreement as putting the project at a point of pressing the button to execute suggests to me that perhaps the opposition did not fully appreciate what they had approved, which I suppose is possible as it is a highly complex project. And they were all quite busy campaigning for re-election at the time they approved it and signed it. Mr. Speaker, given the timing of the approval and the signing of the project agreement, right in the middle of the campaign period for the snap election, I suppose they might not have noticed that the project plans did not have any space allocated for the Department of Environmental Health. I will repeat that, Mr. Speaker. I suppose they might not have noticed that the project plans did not have any space allocated for the Department of Environmental Health to continue their solid waste operations. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the significance of that. We learned, if you'll allow me for a second, sir, we learned during COVID how essential these men and women are who provide these services for us. And there was absolutely no regard paid to the fact that this was an essential component that was missing. The project agreement required for the Department of Environmental Health, Mr. Speaker, to be relocated on a time frame that, much like their projected financial close date, would be nigh on impossible to achieve. Interesting, coming from an opposition that claims to be highly competent. I suppose that there is a possibility that they are aware of this, but felt these issues would have to be further negotiated and resolved in the run-up to financial close. But that is certainly what we are having to do now. And they certainly did not indicate or give us any notice or suggest that this was a problem that we needed to direct our attention to. That is something that has just recently been uncovered as a major issue to be resolved, sir. Mr. Speaker, this was not a project that was ready to move to construction. And frankly, I think it is unfortunate that it has been presented to the public in that way over the past year. But Mr. Speaker, the election campaign was in full swing and election day was less than 3 weeks away. So I suppose you can expect hyperbole at that time. It's certainly gone on since then. We are certainly way past the heady days of the campaign. We should be, although the opposition don't seem to be recognizing this. Members may recall, Mr. Speaker, that the project, now named the Regen Cayman's Energy and Recycling Center, was transitioned to the newly established Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency under my responsibility in October 2021. Since that time, we've had to do a great deal of work to better understand how this project has changed since the deal was first announced 5 years ago, and ensure that the project continues to meet the country's needs. As part of our work to understand the project, the PAC government and the Governor's Office asked the Office of the Auditor General to review the project and provide some initial insights and advice. Reviewing the project in that moment, as it stood when the project agreement was signed, the Auditor General unsurprisingly found that it didn't represent value for money and identified opportunities to address and to try to mitigate this as the negotiations are being finalized. That means, Mr. Speaker, the advice was ways to make the deal better for the people of the Cayman Islands. I would like to reassure my colleagues in this honourable House and the people of the Cayman Islands that we are committed to taking every step that we can to address this concern and ensure that this incredibly important and much needed project, national project, ends up being a value for money proposition for the country. And that it will meet our needs at the time that it is constructed and turned on, and well into the future over the anticipated lifespan of the project. To that end, Mr. Speaker, in April of this year, the Cayman Islands Cabinet approved an extension to the financial close deadline and long-stop date for project agreement negotiations. At the time, the deadline to obtain financial close was no later than 31st October 2022, and the long-stop date was no later than 3 months after the proposed financial close date, or January 2023. As we have continued our negotiations, that project timeline to financial close has shifted slightly, with financial close now anticipated at the end of November 2022. This date, Mr. Speaker, is still well ahead of the project long-stop date of 31st January 2023. Mr. Speaker, given the scale of this project, its national significance, the level of capital investment required, and the proposed lifespan of the new system, I believe 1 extra month to reach financial close is hardly excessive. Let us not forget, Mr. Speaker, that it took more than 3 years for the previous administration to reach commercial close with the DART-led consortium after announcing them as a preferred bidder in 2017. Mr. Speaker, while we're in the matter of capital investment, I'd like to clear up some recent misinformation about the cost of the project facilities. A few weeks ago, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and member for Georgetown East said on the radio that the latest estimated cost for the facilities was $105 million. Mr. Speaker, this is simply not accurate. And as unfortunately is the case too often with statements made by the opposition on this project, in this case, they missed it by nearly 100%. When the previous administration signed the commercial contract with DART in March 2021, the facilities were projected to cost at least CI dollars 205 million. Mr. Speaker, this was an...
Honourable Premier, for clarity, am I understanding correctly that, and I had to look at the writing, is it 105, that's their estimate?
The representation made, Mr. Speaker, by the Leader of the Opposition on the radio show was that the project was slated to cost CI dollars 105 million. When in fact, the agreement that was signed in March of 2021 were projected to cost at least 205 million Cayman Islands dollars.
And just to be absolutely clear, that was not said in the House. That was said on the...
Correct.
On a radio show.
Yes.
Am I understanding correctly?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm not here to row about it, so. Mr. Speaker, this was an increase over initial cost forecast that was tied to a decision to increase the capacity of the facilities in response to improved data regarding the amount of waste that would need to be treated. For clarity, Mr. Speaker, I believe the previous administration's decision to increase the capacity of the facilities prior to signing the project agreement with DART was a sensible one. that was based on the data they had before them at that time. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, members will agree that this projected capital cost is a significant one, and it is worth noting that it is only one component of the overall project cost. In either way and sense, Mr. Speaker, this represents the largest capital project this country has ever initiated. Please know, Mr. Speaker, that my administration is working wherever possible to keep costs down in spite of global supply chain issues and procurement challenges. Our goal to ensure Regen represents a financially viable, our goal is to ensure the Regen represents a financially viable, long-term solution for sustainable solid waste management for all three of our islands. Mr. Speaker, members may recall that this project is being delivered as a PPP, or public-private partnership, where the DART-led consortium will design, build, finance, operate, and maintain the project for the life of the project contract, which will run through the construction period and subsequent 25 years of operations. Mr. Speaker, once the project becomes operational, the Cayman Islands government will pay a per-ton unitary charge to the consortium to process the waste. We expect the operational costs will also be partially offset by the sale of electricity generated by the waste energy plant. I would like to reiterate that the discussions are proceeding at pace, and every effort is being made to ensure that the Cayman Islands and the government are achieving value for money wherever possible. As these contract negotiations are still ongoing, I am somewhat limited in the detail that I can share at this time, but I'm pleased to announce an outline of some important updates. Mr. Speaker, firstly, the Environmental Impact Assessment, or the EIA for the project, which had been paused, has now been restarted. Currently, DART is working with a number of environmental consultants to undertake the baseline technical studies set by the terms of reference that members may recall were finalized in October 2021, after the required public consultation process. The terms of reference guides in the environmental studies that form the final outcome of the EIA for the project. As the work on the EIA proceeds in the coming months, the environmental consultants appointed by the project team in consultation with the Environmental Assessment Board, or EAB, will undertake technical studies and baseline monitoring of noise and vibration, marine and terrestrial ecology, hydrology, and hydrogeology, and air quality, amongst other matters. The environmental studies conducted as part of the EIA will form the basis of an environmental statement. The environmental statement is the final outcome of the EIA and sets the precedent for the project's environmental performance, informing final design and construction, along with permitting and operational requirements of the facility once commissioned. The environmental statement will also be subject to a public consultation period before it is finalized. I want to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to encourage the community to participate in the public consultation for the environmental statement once those dates and locations are announced. We expect the environmental impact assessment process will be completed by October, the end of October of 2023. The second aspect of my update, Mr. Speaker, as part of the approval of the project agreement in March 2021, which the previous administration also agreed, is that the previous administration also agreed to waive the requirement for the DART consortium to obtain planning permission. Members may be aware that such a waiver is allowed for under Section 53 of the Development and Planning Act 2021 revision, where Cabinet feels it is in the public interest so to do. Mr. Speaker, while I cannot speak to the motivations behind this particular aspect of the project agreement, as this was part of the previous Cabinet's approval, the current administration is obligated to fulfill that commitment, and we will be publishing a Gazette notice of that waiver in the coming months. I would also like to assure my colleagues in this Honourable House, as well as the Cayman Islands public, that this planning waiver does not exempt the facility designs and plans from review by the relevant departments and statutory authorities, which normally review and comment on planning applications in the Cayman Islands. Nor does it in any way impact the environmental impact assessment for the project. The plans and designs will still be subject to review and comment by the Department of Planning, the Department of Environment, the Department of Environmental Health, the Water Authority of the Cayman Islands, and other commenting agencies as required. What this waiver does mean, Mr. Speaker, is that the Central Planning Authority will not be the final approver for the facilities, and the publication of the Gazette notice of the Cabinet waiver will be done instead of the usual notification of planning applications that are normally sent to surrounding landowners. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize and reassure the public that this waiver of the requirement to seek planning approval does not exempt the facility designs and plans from being reviewed by the relevant agencies, nor does it impact the EIA process, which will influence the final design. These requirements will be clearly outlined in one of the schedules to the agreement that will be signed at financial close. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, DART has been working to prepare and refine a national public awareness campaign to encourage responsible production and consumption in our community. While I share the concerns with the members of the public who drive past the Georgetown landfill and see the waste appearing to edge closer and closer to the bypass, I have been assured by the team at the Department of Environmental Health that they are confident in our ability to manage the existing landfill footprint to its fullest until the regen facilities are commissioned and operational, which is expected in 2026. However, Mr. Speaker, each and every one of us has a role to play in ensuring that we can successfully do this. As a matter of embracing sustainability and best practice, we should all be rethinking what we consume, reducing what we throw away, reusing items wherever possible, and recycling our glass, aluminum, and number 1 and number 2 plastics at the depots provided and serviced by the team at the Department of Environmental Health. As small islands, land is one of our most finite resources. Using more land for traditional landfilling is not, by any stretch of the imagination, the highest and best use of our limited resources, land resources. Reducing the waste we generate in the first instance, followed by reusing and recycling, are some of the most important tools we have to manage waste more sustainably now and going forward for the future. We have to facilitate a paradigm shift in these islands that takes us back to the mindset of previous generations, embodied without necessarily realizing it. For our predecessors, everything that could be reused was. Material possessions were few and far between, and they were not taken for granted. Throwing away was a last resort, because as they knew, there was no such thing as a way. Even while we work to reach financial close, finalize once and for all the contract negotiations, and build these new facilities, each and every one of us has the opportunity every day to be part of the solution and not the problem. Fill up a reusable water bottle instead of buying new plastic ones. Take recyclables to the public depots rather than simply tossing them in the bin. Make sure waste goes in the bin rather than littering our roadsides. Clearly important for us. I would like to charge everyone here today and those listening to take up this challenge and rethink our waste. I would also like to thank the hardworking leadership and staff of the Department of Environmental Health for their continued management of the active tipping area at the Georgetown Landfill and their tireless work to ensure garbage collection schedules are maintained. I will not stay quiet, Mr. Speaker, and allow the Department of Environmental Health and those hardworking people be criticized on radio shows or otherwise. Working in solid waste management, Mr. Speaker, is not an easy job, and yet is one of the most essential professions in our community to ensuring both human health and environmental health. The Department of Environmental Health team continues to manage the active tipping at the landfill. The aim is to move over time to the Florida Code landfilling standards of operation, which includes the placement of daily cover. Department of Environmental Health will manage the methods by which cover can be produced, moved, and stored for use in the daily operations of the landfill. These are not easy jobs, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure, as they have indicated earlier, members will again join me in thanking the team at the Department of Environmental Health for the work they do around the clock and the valuable public health services they provide on a daily basis. In closing, Mr. Speaker, we are still working through a number of outstanding issues that we will need to agree to reach financial close. But I'm confident that the substantive progress that is being made in the negotiations and the project financial close brings us all in sight. I look forward to providing additional updates to the members of this Honourable House and our wider community at a later time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I have also received and given permission to the Minister of Culture and Minister of Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage to make a statement. Honourable Minister.
Small one.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the MP for West Bay North and as the Minister responsible for youth, sport, culture and heritage, it is with great pleasure that I rise to share with this Honourable House and the public some of the works that is taking place in my ministry since taking up responsibility for these subjects some 18 months ago. Before I proceed, Mr. Speaker, I wish to take this opportunity to thank my core ministry staff, which is led by and consists of professional, knowledgeable, capable, enthusiastic women for the astonishing work that they are doing. They believe in accountability, something that seems to have been lacking. I want to give them thanks for the hours that they put in without, I don't think there's overtime, but I know my staff puts in overtime, Mr. Speaker. The team is striving to uphold the motto to make the lives of those we serve better, but to also meet my 3 strategic priorities, which are 1, talent identification and development, enhancement and empowerment of youth, and awareness and preservation of culture and heritage. Now, Mr. Speaker, everyone would automatically think talent identification and development would mean just the sports. But this is also very important in our culture, in our heritage, the arts. We intend to identify and develop people in all these various fields, not just sports. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to highlight some key accomplishments so far for this year. As a ministry, at a ministry level, noteworthy achievements this year include reconvening the National Youth Commission, the establishment of various task forces to address cultural gaps, which include a National Identity Task Force to focus on the identity of national dress, dance, and dish. Mr. Speaker, you would think that these things would have been addressed a long time ago. But if we ask 20 Caymanians what's their national dish, you'll get 10 different answers. We know what our national flower is. We know the national bird. But the rest of these things we don't know, sir. We've never agreed on. Also, a historical site task force to identify and preserve built cultural sites and also preserve natural cultural sites. Mr. Speaker, an Emancipation Day Task Force. This is something that I have come to discover that we've never discussed or had taught our people what the true dates are, what happened. That when the Caribbean was emancipated, the governor or the person who was in charge here didn't want to give it to us, and the governor who was stationed in Jamaica came down here a year later and told them that we had to be emancipated. But unlike the rest of the Caribbean, who had to wait 3 or 4 years for a transition period, we were given ours immediately. So ours is before everybody else. We are unique, once again, Mr. Speaker. We've never been taught this, the majority of us.
You got correct history and good one too.
Provision of financial grants, which allowed us to partner with international brand Young Chef, Young Waiter Award Global, which supported 2 winners to travel to Monaco and participate in the World Finals, Mr. Speaker. We'll have young Brittany Borden representing us as the chef and young Laurent Borden representing us as the waiter. 2 young people who are bright, articulate, and they are hungry to win. Provide overseas sponsorship to 3 local writers, of which one was from the Education Ministry. We sent these people to Gibraltar on a course of illustrators and writers to produce children's books for Cayman history and culture. The A will probably stand for agouti, hopefully. Sponsored students from UCCI Performing Arts to travel overseas.
assisted various young persons in local and overseas programs, provided financial grants to up-to-date 16 young student athletes. Mr. Speaker, it goes back to a fund that you once had called the Nation Building Fund. We may have to revisit that in the next budget because I'm finding where I'm having to do it a lot, sir. Sponsored various sports clubs, sponsored art week and various music festivals, and provided financial support to local artists. The ministry has also now set up a criteria on how to access funds from the ministry. It's not just done ad hoc anymore. It is done now. This is the criteria you have to meet. Then we decide who will get the funds and how much you're entitled to. So everybody gets a fair chance, Mr. Speaker. There's only a limited pot. Mr. Speaker, we have also endeavored to reintroduce programs and activities to benefit all ages in our community. Some of these community programs include Saturdays in the Park, Caymanian Proud events, Pirate Fest, previously known as Pirates Week, partnering with the Department of Children and Family Services for Older Persons Month, and so much so, Mr. Speaker, that on October the 22nd at the Truman Borden Stadium, we're having an older people's games, 65 and older. They'll be doing different events, and it's open to all of our people, Mr. Speaker. We also have a partnership with the Protocol Unit for the second year in support of National Heroes Day. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to inform that the ministry team is now redirecting its focus to the national youth and sports policies, which, when received, were significantly outdated. Work is also being done to establish a sports commission, finalize the criteria for focus sports, revamp the elite athletes program, and finalize an MOU for the 50-meter pool project, which we have universities overseas already lining up to come here to train during the winter months. Mr. Speaker, in addition, assistance is being offered to our entities as they go through a restructuring process to develop and enhance services. Mr. Speaker, with all that I have mentioned above, despite going through a restructuring process, both the Department of Sports and Youth Services Unit have continued to provide services in our community which supports the government's broad outcomes. The Department of Sports continues to assess and prioritize the maintenance and development of 27 facilities across the Cayman Islands and collaborate with various sporting associations and organizations. Through this cross-agency collaboration, the following initiatives have been made possible. Honoring Women's Month Holistic Living presentation, planned and organized by the Department of Sports in support of the Honoring Women Month campaign. Working with the Department of Education Services to hold the inter-primary and inter-secondary track meet. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say a special thank you to the Minister of Education, the CEO, Mr. Mark Ray of Education, and the acting Chief Officer for Education for the close collaborations that we have started, that they see the importance of culture, of heritage, and of sports, that the base is in the schools. And I must say, it is a pleasure to finally get some work being done and constructive discussions. Thank you, Madam Minister. Piloting with the Department of Children and Family Services to provide exercise programs in West Bay, Bordentown, Georgetown, and Northside for aging population. And we intend to also move some of those programs toward water. Partnering with the Department of Education Services, Cayman Cricket, CUC, to host students from government and private schools in the inaugural primary school girls cricket rally. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to inform that the Youth Services Unit hosted its 9th annual Proud of Them award campaign earlier this year. Furthermore, the Youth Services Unit, in collaboration with the National Youth Commission and the Ministry, will plan and rebrand the campaign to celebrate its 10th year in 2023. The unit was also able to support the attendance of a young Caymanian at the Commonwealth Youth Forum in Rwanda. Collaborate with the Cayman Islands Youth Assembly on a public consultation paper highlighting youth concerns about proposed penal code reform. Finally, the unit facilitated a number of community programs. Mr. Speaker, there's also a big youth conference called YES, Youth Empowerment Symposium. This is something that's being worked on very carefully and very slowly. Our own people from overseas will come in to speak. And Mr. Speaker, when this is done, this will be a monumental young people's symposium. Mr. Speaker, our SAGCs consist of the National Gallery, the National Museum, and the Cayman National Cultural Foundation. Significant development programs and accomplishments have been provided throughout our three islands by these entities, which supports one of my priorities, which is to bring awareness and preservation of our culture and heritage. This is something that the PAC government takes very seriously. Mr. Speaker, time would not allow me to go fully into details about all of the achievements from our SAGCs. However, I wish to briefly highlight a few. The National Gallery of the Cayman Islands has received more than 12,000 visitors across its main venues in all three islands, and this is in spite of pandemic rules. Had several Miss Lassie paintings donated into the national collection by people from overseas who had purchased them. Launched its Community Connections program to engage young persons from the local children's home and the Sunrise Adult Training Center in art workshops and tours, and was a lead sponsor of Cayman Art Week, which was a smashing success when you talk to the artists. The Cayman Islands National Museum has hosted exhibits and events such as Miss Annie Hulda Borden Animatronic and the Platinum Jubilee Celebration. Successfully hosted another annual cultural summer camp, continued with their popular radio show as on Caymanian language, culture and history, Siwase. We are also looking forward in the near future to celebrating with the museum its 32nd anniversary with Lokia, Old Time Days Come Back Again. And last but not least, Mr. Speaker, the Cayman National Cultural Foundation is undergoing a strategic review to develop and enhance purpose. While doing so, they have been able to successfully host a cultural summer camp, recognize 15 Caymanian with art and culture awards, provide grants to 10 individuals, organizations, reopen the Mind's Eye Center in support of public and school tours, continue to support the Caymanian Folk Singers Group, and oversee the repatriation of 2 Miss Lassie paintings. Mr. Speaker, while we have accomplished much since taking office, my ministry and I are mindful that there is still much work to be done in these subject areas. We are committed to ensuring that the Ministry of Youth, Sport, Culture and Heritage has not only the foundational framework needed to carry on this work, but that we are also committed to uphold in policy and legislation what is necessary to support and enhance the subject areas in my ministry and benefit future generations of the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, on the local front, in West Bay North, 3 parks are in the works, 1 on Bramble, 1 in the back of West Bay Gardens, and a 5-a-side court. Mr. Speaker, I would like to also say that the Heritage Park, right next to the 8-Bush Stadium, has now been transferred to my ministry. Things that we will be looking at is that artwork, thatch work, etc. will be there that tourists can make it a stopping point. And on weekends, it's a marketplace for vegetables, fruits, and even fish. Because I've spoken to some fishermen, and they said they would bring their stuff there as well. So this, we hope to have it up and going by the new year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me this time to share, and I invite the public to continue to monitor and process my ministry, and where possible, be a part in important work that we are doing. Do not be afraid to come and talk to us. We are glad for input, especially on these topics. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to close by saying to my teammates, in PACT, my ministry don't bring money into the country, Mr. Speaker, but my teammates have allowed PACT, allowed my ministry ways to get things done by finding the finances over and over. To the PACT government, thank you all very much for supporting sports, youth, culture, and heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I have also been notified and given permission to the Honorable the Minister of Planning, Housing, for a statement.
Honorable members, it is my privilege again to address the Honorable House as I provide an update to the people of these beloved islands on the projects in the department, entities under our portfolio in the case of the Ministry of Planning, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, I refer to our portfolios because while each of my colleagues have a ministerial or a parliamentary or a secretarial responsibility under the Constitution, in the end, we have a collective responsibility. We take this collective responsibility serious because ultimately it is not about what each minister or parliamentarian secretary can achieve individually, but instead how we can effectively work as a team to bring our positive and long-lasting outcomes from our people. After all, Mr. Speaker, we are ultimately responsible and accountable to the people of these islands. Our commitment to accountability and responsibility are also backed by the PACT government's ongoing transparency, which you as well as our people of these islands will acknowledge from the published cabinet meeting summaries. Mr. Speaker, I also want to acknowledge my parliamentarian secretary, Dwayne John Seymour, Mr. Isaac Rankin, Ms. Kathy Ebanks-Wilkes, who provide a high level of support on a number of initiatives involving in the areas of agriculture, housing, as well as technical, vocational, and educational training. Mr. Speaker, while I am thanking all of the people of the Cayman Islands for the opportunity to represent these islands, it would be remiss of me not to also say a special thank you to my Northside constituency. They were the people responsible for putting me in the seat. I want to thank them for the level of trust and confidence that they have in me. And because I see our collective responsibility as a privilege offered to us by the people, I promise to serve them with respect, dignity, and dedication. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take this time to state that I owe a debt of gratitude to my wife, my children, family, and friends for their understanding and support. Without this support, I would not have been able to work as effectively as I have done with the dynamic PACT group, or PACT team, whichever they want to call us. Some of my colleagues across the hall, well, I wish they were here today, would relate to this, because some of them may have been in a position where they may have had to work long hours away from their families. So, Mr. Speaker, I truly thank my family for their support. Mr. Speaker, having described the support, I am grateful to have the PAC team's approach to accountability and collective responsibility and transparency. I will now lay out some of the things we have achieved working together, which are aligned with the PAC government's broad strategic outcomes. We have been focusing on over the past year and a half. These include providing solutions to improve the well-being of the Caymanians so they can achieve their full potential, through strengthening our agriculture sector to enhance national food security, affordable housing, training for younger people under the Public Works Department apprenticeship training program, and utilizing technology to streamline process at our public-facing departments for greater efficiency and service delivery. Building a modern infrastructure to ensure a successful future for our island. Approving our road network while acknowledging the process set out in the National Conservation and Directive. Mr. Speaker, it is the following of the process that the people complained about with the previous administration. Where were the meetings with the public? Where was the consultation with the Department of Environment and the National Trust of the Cayman Islands? Well, Mr. Speaker, not only did the National Roads Authority take the initiative to invite the Department of Environment to meetings and discussions at their concerns and requirements for our environmental impact study, the NRA has followed the rules of the NCC to a T, even explaining on live on-air shows, initial steps involved in the study. Public meetings will also be held in the future to explain the steps, again, to take questions from members of the public. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the NRA and the members of the ministry had several meetings with representatives from the National Trust of the Cayman Islands, hearing their detailed concerns. Mr. Speaker, we have done and are doing all of this as a team because it is always at the forefront of our minds who we ultimately work for, and we aim to be accountable, responsible, and as a transparent government. We have also taken the steps to address the stormwater management framework, which, according to documents that I have seen, was supposed to have been addressed many years ago under previous administrations. Knowing that our job is to work for the people, Mr. Speaker, the PAC government is now working on proposals that will result in more accountability from our early on in the planning stages when it comes to proper stormwater management solutions. There will be rules and guidelines, consequences and breaches for those rules in them guidelines. And when it comes to stormwater management, Mr. Speaker, it is not just about all the work that we are doing, additional drains and putting them in periodic cleaning schedules, and NRA publishing the schedules online so members of the different communities can see. It is also about options and additional drains that makes the stormwater management framework sustainable and in the best interests of our people for the long term. Again, I thank the Premier and the Ministry of Sustainability and his team for their input with respect to the framework, both from an environmental and a sustainable perspective. Now, when it comes to infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, I just want to, it was throughout this storm that just passed us by, all our low-lying areas were done very good compared to what they have done before. Mr. Speaker, the work that we did in Cumba has relieved a lot of the water damage that would have occurred down in that area. And the work that we've actually done in Randyke in those areas and making sure that culverts are always cleaned have relieved the pressure off of the people in that area also. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank the NRA and their team for all of the hard work that they've done throughout that storm to make sure that they were out there and getting the drains cleared and making sure that all the area was taken care of. I thank them. Now, when it comes on to infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, we have also been taking the time to develop on our internet and telecommunications sector. Regarding this, we are looking at a number of options that we want to see for the Cayman Islands. Having a world-class infrastructure when it comes to internet and telecommunications. It is through such investment that the Cayman Islands can stay ahead of the game and be a leader in the communications and not a follower. Internet and telecommunication options will also help us to become more resilient, especially those options that may allow us to remain in communication even immediately following a natural disaster. This not only keeps us connected to the world, Mr. Speaker, but gives business the comfort about the business continuity and disaster recovery preparedness plans. Some of the initiatives led by the ministry, which will improve the quality of life for the Cayman Islands, include supporting of the strengthening of the modernization of the agriculture sector, increasing investment in awareness of the technical vocational education and training, provision for quality affordable housing, increasing the number of parks, civic centers, and multi-purpose halls within the communities, providing funding for land acquisition for agriculture purpose and others. Mr. Speaker, let me begin my update with the Department of Agriculture, which will contribute to the government's broad outcome to provide a solution to improve the well-being for our people so they can achieve their full potential. In issuance, agriculture, food security are at the forefront of minds of the Caymanians and the government. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we well as ongoing threats to the global food supplies caused by the war in Europe and the climate change. We are feeling the effects in high food prices and empty supermarket shelves. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of the Department of Agriculture continues to tackle these issues head-on. In doing so, our approach is not to just react to the impacts, but to carefully plan in advance in the event of a range of special or natural disasters, world events, pandemics, like mentioned before. This approach of carefully planning requires us to work strategically together. Our team also discussed partnerships with local and internal stakeholders. Our aim on all of this, Mr. Speaker, is to enhance long-term food security. Not just for us, Mr. Speaker, but for the generations to come. All of our efforts, Mr. Speaker, will hopefully lead to an expansion in diversity on food sources, while at the same time strengthening the modernization of the agriculture sector. And in doing this, we must become both food secure and nutrition secure, Mr. Speaker. To achieve diversity and security, Mr. Speaker, the ministry has been actively working with international stakeholders, as I said. In saying this, it is important that we not only work with existing stakeholders, but we grow with new partners. Mr. Speaker, this is especially important given that over 80% of our food supply mainly comes from the United States. Regarding this, we have already seen the challenges that can arise when we do have a variety of options and rely mainly on one jurisdiction. People panicking rushing to the supermarkets because, you know, their food security seems to be uncertain. The exportation of additional food security options, Mr. Speaker, has therefore been focused on expanding into regional trade and critical to our long-term food security stability. It also reflects that the Park government acknowledged the need to diversify, given the now very population of the Cayman Islands. Mr. Speaker, in light of the direction we have been having discussions with the neighboring countries, Honduras, Jamaica, and others, with the aim of sourcing affordable, fresh, and nutritious food closer to home. Being close to home may remain a short transportation time frame and avoiding our goods having to sit and wait in several different ports before they get to us. If we can reduce the transportation lag, Mr. Speaker, it means a longer shelf life for goods in the supermarket, should the supermarkets agree that this could be beneficial for the people. As a result, Mr. Speaker, the ministry team had a fruitful scoping mission in Honduras in June, where we are now looking to have a direct shipping route between the Cayman Islands and Honduras. We are working closely with the private sector to ascertain the needs of the islands and to assist and support the logistics to make the trade bridge as smooth and as possible. We cannot do this without working together with these partners. Mr. Speaker, our meetings with counterparts in Jamaica have made great progress. In May this year, under a new import-export arrangement between our islands and Jamaica, we broadened the list of agriculture imported produce. You know, just to add a few is the plantain, the breadfruit, the soursops, and ackee, the frozen ackee. The demand for some of these newly added produce have exceeded what we grow locally. Until sufficient supply is produced locally, Jamaica offers a good alternative as a closer than other countries that we import similar items from. Mr. Speaker, we have worked closely with the Agriculture Society, the farmers, and the importers to ensure that local produce takes priority and that the overseas products will only supplement the demand. We have made that promise. In the meantime, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to provide our farmers with the resources needed to strengthen their resilience to boost the island's food and nutrition security. We are very thankful, Mr. Speaker, that members of the farming community did not suffer any major losses or damages from the effects of Hurricane Ian last week. We have a few reported, but a small loss of vegetable crops, such as tomatoes and little hot peppers, but nothing substantial. Last year, Mr. Speaker, Tropical Storm Grace badly impacted the island, causing extensive damage to the agriculture sector, particularly to the crops, with an estimate of 60 to 90% of fruit trees affected. Our ministry responded with the Tropical Storm Grace Farmers Assistance Project to provide relief to the commercial farmers who suffered loss of income and livestock damages to the crops and farm. A total of $3 million was made available to 124 commercial farmers who were able to get these farms back up and going with minor repairs to their damaged and infrastructure return to production.
Honourable Member, I note that you have a long way yet to go on this statement, and therefore I'm going to ask you to break at this point so we can take the midday break until 1:30.